I think I can start with the introduction, and I'm sure everyone will be here for the lecture. So good afternoon. Welcome to the fifth mentorship lecture of the Eurocolagnonet, EMSCA, and ICRN. It is an honor to have Professor Mario Strazzabosco with us, and I want to thank him for accepting our proposal to give a talk in our program. As you know, our mentorship lectures have the endorsement of ISEL and UEG, and I want to thank the support also of UK and US cholangiocarcinoma charities, the MMF and Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, and also University La Sapienza in Rome for hosting the lecture. Let me introduce you our two moderators today, two junior investigators of our cause action, Maitane and Colm, who immediately said they were willing to participate as moderators in this lecture. Dr. Maitane Asensio is a postdoc in the Laboratory of Experimental Hepatology and Drug Targeting at the University of Salamanca in Spain. And Dr. Colm O'Rourke is an assistant professor at the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and works in the Biotech Research and Innovation Center, BRIC. Thank you both, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rocio, for this nice introduction. On behalf of Colm and I would like to thank the organizers, Rocio and Dr. Gavi, for inviting us to moderate this session, this mentorship lecture. It's a great honor for us, and we will try to do our best. Of course, we want also to thank Professor Strazzabosco for accepting the invitation to be the speaker of this mentorship lecture. So thank you and welcome. The topic of today is an international career across the Atlantic. I'm really sure that it's going to be very useful, interesting, and inspiring for young scientists. So I want to encourage them to make questions at the end of the lecture. You know that you can do it in two ways. You can use the Q&A panel or the chat. And afterwards, Colm and I will read them to our speaker. And now Colm will introduce the speaker. So Colm, please.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, although he does not require much of an introduction given his decades of seminal work in our field. So Professor Mario Strazzabosco is a professor of medicine at Yale University in the US. He is director of the Yale Liver Cancer Program and co-director of the Yale Liver Center. After training at the University of Padova in Italy, Professor Strazzabosco became the founding chief of the GI section and medical director of transplantation in Bergamo, before crossing the Atlantic in 2005 to become professor of medicine and gastroenterology, as well as director of the transplant hepatology unit at Yale University. Scientifically, Professor Strazzabosco conducted his PhD research at the University of Padova, and then later postdoctoral research at Yale's Liver Center. Today, he has published more than 150 peer-reviewed publications spanning diverse prestigious journals. His main research focuses on themes surrounding biliary epithelial pathobiology, liver repair and transplantation, and liver cancers. On top of all these accomplishments, Professor Strazzabosco served as editor for journals such as, associate editor for journals such as Hepatology and Liver International. He is a scientific reviewer for funding bodies in both Europe and the US, and he is a member of multiple scientific societies and charities. He has received many prestigious awards and is a fellow of the American College of Gastroenterology, the European Board of Surgery, and the American Association for the Study of Liver Disease. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Professor Strazzabosco to give us a first-hand account of his transcontinental career. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. And when Chiara contacted me and gave me this task, I thought, how do I distill tips for young investigator without being, usual things that you guys are told. So I thought the best way was to use my own career as a case in study. So I will go through you with what I did, and hopefully you'll gather questions and I don't dare say inspiration, but maybe questions that we can address. But my career, you have to realize, it's being not usual. And in fact, I would define it using the voice of Robert Frost, who is a great American poet who wrote, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." And I like you to keep this in mind when we talk, because the less traveled road is the one that may be more difficult, maybe it's less certain, but for sure has the biggest reward. So how did, and the other thing you need to keep in mind is that my career developed flying for more than 2 million miles through different places, from Padova to New Haven, to Padova again, to Bergamo, and again New Haven, and then Milan, and finally again New Haven. So mobility was one of my main feature. I use mobility rather than staying in the trenches. So how did I start? I started from the University of Padova. So suggestion number one, try to graduate from a very well-known university, is celebrating its 800 years this year. I got there my MD, my specialty in internal medicine, my PhD in combination with the University of Milan, and my specialty in gastroenterology. And while I was doing this, I came across a patient that really drew my attention. Was a young man that presented with itching, sclera icterus, that was worsening, fatigue, and hyperbilirubinemia, cholestatic liver picture that turned out to have two very typical features of sclerosing cholangitis. And what, I'm not going to discuss sclerosing cholangitis today, and indeed I will limit the scientific part of my presentation. But sclerosing cholangitis was a fascinating disease. And most of the fascinating disease was because it was of unknown etiology and pathogenesis. Conventional immunosuppressive therapy failed, and the only curative treatment was eventually liver transplantation. So it was an unmet need, something that we needed to understand. That focused my attention on cholestatic liver disease. And I started to attend some of the meetings. At that time, bile acids were being developed as a therapeutic agents. Also, the desoxycholate was being given a patient with gastrones, but then we started to realize it was of benefit also for some other cholestatic liver diseases. And in a meeting in Cortina d'Ampezzo in '85, I met James Boyer. And James Boyer was showing a very cool novel technique to study biosecretion in isolated hepatocytes that would form what we call couplets. And in the middle in between the couplets of hepatocyte, there was a canaliculus. And you could follow this canaliculus and make inference about secretion and so on and so forth. And I really decided that I had to go there. So I spoke to him, and he was very happy to provisionally accept me in his laboratory, as long as I was coming with my own funding. So that was the first time in which I had to face competition to get into some prestigious fellowship. And I was lucky enough, I got an NIH Fogarty Fellowship and a fellowship also from NATO, that at that time was investing also in using science as a way to bridge, to create bridges across the Atlantic. With that, I could move to Yale, where I spent 3 years. And these 3 years, I took up a very difficult question. So how was ursodeoxycholic acid reabsorbed, and how through this reabsorbment, how that was generating the hypercholerasis and so on. And we actually came up with the idea in which the reabsorption was taking place through an weak acid mechanism and passive absorption at the level of the bile duct. But in order to test this hypothesis, we needed to isolate bile ducts. That at the time was something that was just beginning to be done. And after a couple of years of work, we could actually finally isolate the bile ducts that you see there with the cytokeratin 19 staining. And we started to define the pathobiology of this elusive liver cells. So the other tip here is find a unmet need and become an expert in a technology that is novel, that is cool, because at that stage of your career, you will have to do the experiment in the lab, and you will need to become an expert on some novel technology. At that time, that was really novel, okay? And we started to describe how the liver was making bile at the level of the canaliculus, and so on. So after 3 years, it was the time in which Jim and I parted ways. He taught me everything about how to run a lab, how to design the research, and even how to sail. But then he remained interested in the bile acids, as you probably know. But I was fascinated by understanding the cholangiocyte component of the epithelia of the liver. And so we parted ways. He remained sailing in the North Atlantic, and I went back sailing in the Mediterranean Sea. I guess you can see the difference in color of the water. Anyway, I went home, and I was lucky enough to meet Professor Crepaldi, who offered me a very good package to bring me home and helped me in setting up a lab that had nothing less than what I had at Yale. So we started to study cholangiopathies for a number of reasons. They are chronic invalidated disease, unknown pathogenesis. They are rare but frequent as a group. They are an important cause of liver transplantation, but also epithelial inflammation. There is a model to study the epithelial reaction to damage, the tissue repair regeneration in the liver, and so on. And this is another key point. You, at the start of your career, you will need to be fascinated by something that is new, something that is unknown, something that represents a need that needs to feel and met. And you will have to network with your friends and with people like you with similar interests. So this is a ASLD single topic conference that was held like a couple of years after I came back. And here you can recognize several very well-known people from Jim and Nick LaRusso, Alcerica, Alpini, and Antonio, Mario, and Mimmo. So the 3 Italian fellows that went to Boyer's lab. But this was important because from that point, we started to use the name cholangiopathies. And basically, a new field was funded with much research to follow. And the other thing is, work with your friends and set ambitious goals. So here we are, Antonio Benedetti, Mimmo Alvaro, Mario Strazzabosco, with Jim. And in this reunion of the old fellow in Yale, we imagined that it was time for us, the 3 of us, to organize a high-level meeting. And we organized a folk symposia on the vanishing bile duct syndrome in Spoleto. and edited a book. And that basically put us in the international eye as independent investigators. Doing science must be a pleasure for you. That is an important part where you have fun. So this is a hut where Nicola Russo and I hiked in the Alps. And due to bad weather, we remain in this hut and start drawing on a towel, on a piece of paper, the outcome of our discussion of the role of inflammation in the pathogenesis of biliary tree. That became a gastroenterology paper years after, but we are still working, basically following this working model that sees inflammation as a main cause of the various histological changes that you can see in cholangiopathies, from cholestasis, ductopenia, fibrosis, and even liver cancer. So that again, it's important to have friendship and to discuss science when you do something that you are enjoying. It was also, you know, at that time I thought I had established my lab, established my the beginning of my reputation in the field, and I was publishing in good journals. When the very same person that helped me setting up the lab, Professor Crepaldi, also called the chairman, he called me up and said, "You will work as an hepatologist in the new liver transplant program." And when he saw my face, he said, "I don't want to hear that you don't like the idea." So I said, "Look, transplant hepatology is a lot of clinical work and not much publication. I'm here. I've done everything. I wish to continue to do so." And he wouldn't hear any reason. But then, although I was disappointed, I realized that this was an opportunity under disguise. And in fact, I started working on the liver transplant program, and those were the times in which we knew almost nothing, and it was a discovery every day. And it was really fantastic. And I also started to understand that if I had to understand my profession, I had to explore it 360 degrees. And therefore, I attended an advanced course in total quality management in healthcare at the Lewis Business School in the meanwhile. And I have to say that this helped me very much to what was come after. So why do I say this was an opportunity under disguise? Well, for the simple reason that I met several people, including Bruno Gridelli. And Bruno Gridelli, who was a surgeon, and was setting up a transplant program in Bergamo, needed a chief of gastroenterology there, a medical director of transplantation. And I was 41 years old. But it was a time in which the hospital of Bergamo was looking for young people to go to the next level with the hospital. And so it happened. At the start of the new millennium, I became chief of gastroenterology and medical director of transplantation at the hospital of Bergamo. And that was a major, this is another lesson. My career was all geared toward becoming, to be an academic career. But Bergamo was not an academic center, it was a hospital. And so for me, it was a major change of focus, the idea of becoming not a professor, but a chief, clinical chief. But I did it anyway, and it was a fantastic experience. And, besides this, there was innovation, continuous innovation. And I had the chance to work with great surgeons. Bruno Gridelli was a great leader, a great surgeon, and one of the main proponents of the split liver And our mantra was, the liver, there are two livers in the body, the, the left and the right, and the liver should be split every time that is possible. And with that, we set up one of the major pediatric programs in Europe, and the second or third busiest transplant program in Italy. But also, and that's another tip, you know, I was actively seeking funding from charities, fundraising, grateful patient, and I had the luck to meet some very generous people and industrialists from the town of Bergamo, and I wish to remember Miro Radici, his wife, Anna Maria, Cesare Zonca, Carito Bergamasco, and others that allow me with a very large donation to set up a liver cell biology laboratory in this hospital called the Celliver. So thanks to the cell biology laboratory, we could finally harness the profound gift of liver transplantation, which is not only the gift of an organ, it's the gift of knowledge, because using liver transplant, you can expand the knowledge in the liver, the knowledge in regeneration. You know that Prometheus was guilty of giving to the man the gift of knowledge. And so we started, you know, using human material coming from the explant, we could study the anion exchanger activity in BBC patient in collaboration with Pamplona. We could start study the pathophysiology of ciliary diseases in the liver. And by studying Alagille syndrome, we came up with many observations on how the liver regenerates and the role of Notch ciliary. So that was an incredible opportunity. But in addition to that, we also organized, I organized together with my good friend Massimo Pinzani, at that time in Florence, then in London, the European Liver Cell Biology Club. And you can see here the first meeting of the SERCB that was held in Tuscany, in Sarteano. So that, what was the tips here? The tips is networking. Networking and generate new ideas. So we were the leader of this group, and this group has been gathering every 3 years since now. And I think next year there will be another one, ACRCB 10 or what. But it was important to generate scholarly work and extend that to the European contest and also international contest. So that was not enough to be considered from the Italian university, okay? So you run a major transplant program, you run a major GI division, you have a intensive cell biology research, and you are, you know, well recognized in Europe, but for the Italian system that was at that time very much feudal in his management, that was not enough. And when the University of Bicocca wanted me to join, that met with a lot of resistance from the hospitals, from the Milan establishment, etc., etc., etc. So that was another disappointment, but again, the disappointment became a major blessing, because at that time, Jim Boyer and others at Yale were watching what we were doing in our transplant program. And so they asked, why don't you come back? So 2005, I came back to Yale as a full professor, tenure of medicine, and as a medical director of liver transplant. And I had a very good package to set up a laboratory in the TAC building. And that was a, so from hospital to Yale University. That was a great thing. And the difficult part in that time was to get NIH funding. And since I came in as a professor, basically I had my only chance to get funding was through the R01 mechanism. So if you are a young investigator in the US, you will have to go through several steps designed for younger investigation, the K program and so on. Coming in as I did, what I had to do was to immediately gather enough preliminary data to be able to compete for R01s, which I did and successfully. So I could focus on rare biliary diseases as a Rosetta Stone to understand biliary pathophysiology. Well, at that point, I started to talk, I started to realize that Yale was a global institution and had many relationships with university outside, including a partnership with University College of London. So I interviewed Dean Alpert at the time and said, what is that you look for when you establish an international collaboration? Well, she said, you have to have an institution of similar academic prestige. There has to be mutual improvement. Projects need to be ambitious. And this needs to be formally recognized. And most of all, fully financed projects. So, my experience was that there's no way to create an international program with the US unless you are the money with you, okay? But that was possible at that time because of the Celliver, with this laboratory that we created. And so we set up a collaboration between the Hospital of Bergamo, the School of Medicine Milano Bicocca, and Yale University. And that was a very interesting collaboration, brought a lot of young physician and student to Yale and so on. And this is the main program. But when you set up a collaboration like this, you always have to ask yourself three questions: why, who benefits, and how. So if you don't have a good, convincing answer to these three questions, the thing is not going to work. So think about and plan before embarking yourself in this, because it's not easy. And then we could talk forever, how this collaboration should be set up. Is this natural evolution? The fact that we researchers are always in contact internationally, or is through an intelligent design? So there are institutions from one side and the other side, government from one side and the other side that decide that there is a mutual benefit in doing so. It's what we call internationalization, at least in Italy, has nothing to do with an intelligent design, okay? But never lose hope. So at that time, the University of Milan Bicocca participated to a contest run by the Ministry of the MUR, the Ministry of Research and University, to bring back Italian scholars abroad. And so they created a chair of gastroenterology and asked me to join. And I did, because, the Italian university didn't really thought it was worth it. And now finally they thought about it, that this happened. And so I was really attracted by doing this. And we set up a collaboration again between US, Yale University and Bicocca. My primary appointment was in Milan, but I had like a part-time appointment in the US. And through that, we realized many bilateral programs. But I was also very involved, once again, in setting up a new division of gastroenterology, because one of the reasons Milano Bicocca was interested is because there was no gastroenterology there. And so after, an intense work, we had the specialty, we had the laboratory again, an international center for digestive health. This is the structure that I designed for the gastroenterology unit there, with hepatology and endoscopy, and I don't want to go into that, but you need and again, my total quality management course at the Lewis University was very helpful in this environment. But we also created the Master in Liver Transplantation. So Master in Liver Transplantation was and is the only one in Italy. In other countries like US, you do have to have a fellowship in liver transplant to call yourself transplant hepatologist. That's not really in Italy. There's also only a certificate, but we put together the San Gerardo Hospital, the Papa Giovanni from Bergamo, the Niguarda Istituto Tumori from Milano. Basically, most of the transplants that were performed in the region of Lombardy. And to this time, this is still ongoing. And actually now it's a collaborative program between University of Milano Bicocca and the University of Padova. The other thing that, dealing daily with all the problems in delivering care during a crisis, and new drugs being developed, like, for example, those for hepatitis C, I had to face daily the problem of how do we obtain the best outcome at an affordable cost. So I became interested in what is called value-based medicine, which is a proposition that says that what it counts really is the value for the patient, and the value for the patient is mainly based on outcome, and actually patient relevant outcome. So I promoted this philosophy with through different meetings, both here in the US, at the SLD. But what's really important here is the message above. So while you work in the system, you have to work also on the system. The same innovation that you apply in your research work, you need to apply in how the system is working around you. You have to be aware of the fault of the system and try to modify the system as much as you can, because if we researchers and we physicians don't do that, it can only go south. So we became a major promoters of the value-based care in hepatology and wrote extensively about this. But this brought us to back to Yale, season 3. And at this time, I don't know if it is the last season or not, okay? But for now, we are still episode 10 of season 3. What brought me back to Yale? Well, I grew through the ranks. I became department chair and deputy dean, and I sort of started to think that no matter what I was doing, the impact was anyway limited in a certain extent. And on the other hand, Yale University was ready to apply these value-based medicine principles, and wanted to set a new liver cancer program. So here we go. I came back full time as a co-director of the Liver Center and director of the liver transplant program at the Smilo Cancer Center. They had this new fantastic cancer hospital and so on. So I came back, and we don't need to go through this, but these are the concept in the value-based medicine, how you should set up new programs. Okay, there needs to be team-based, multidisciplinary, multidepartmental, and have a built-in capability to collect the outcome and be quality run. You need to collect quality measurement and continuously circle back to understand what kind of improvement you can make. And with that, we need to understand that if you want to take care of patients with liver cancer, you need a village. Here there are like 3,000 outstanding physicians with different specialties, each of them a leader in their own right and field. And we all work together in a program trying to do our best for the patient, to the tumor board, and so on and so forth. But the key is go beyond the specialty boundaries and expand and include. An interventional radiologist who deals with liver patients every day is an hepatologist. It's not only an interventional radiology. You have to include other people in your own field. And so we went. In the meanwhile, my research also morphed into the morphogens. So the signaling systems that are relevant for repair, for cancer, for development, and we studied Notch, beta-catenin, YAP, and started to develop an interest in the tumor microenvironment, which is how different it is from hepatocellular carcinoma and intercellular carcinoma, and acquiring novel techniques in order to understand the rules of this multi-ethnic society that lives around the cancer. How do we interact with each other using novel models? We expanded into study the impact of the microbiota and changes in microbiota on the biliary pathophysiology, and in particular in cystic fibrosis, as this is also has been very rewarding. We are thinking how to apply these technologies in order to understand the novel treatment aspects, and we expanded our activity in new novel models of organoids, iPSC-derived liver cells, and also, again, modifying the organoid. This is an organoid which is split. Rather than having the apical membrane in the inside, has the apical membrane on the outside. So why I'm showing this? I'm showing this because you need to innovate continuously. You cannot stay put in what you're doing. You have to move on, innovate technically, innovate in the way you deal with managing your patient or your unit, innovate in terms of your question. It's a continuous innovation. The NIH wants you to always think how you challenge paradigms and how you change paradigms. One of the little criticism you may have in your grant from the study section is, yeah, this is well done, this is very interesting, but is not innovative. It's incremental. So you need to think always out of the box, always challenge the paradigm. And if your grant really does that, it'll be granted. I never seen a very good, outstanding grant being denied the granting, even when I was a member of the study section. So that's the point. So, and the other thing for all of you that you may face sometimes some disappointment, remain in medicine, remain in science. It's a meaningful, wonderful life. You meet bright people, you make friendship, you will see amazing places. You will be at the forefront. You will make new thing happen. Work in the system, but also on the system. And you know, I need to thank my trainee, and all of them took something, but brought much more than they took away. And I also need to thank people. I need to thank Professor Pozan, who taught me about mitochondria when I was a student. Professor Ocoliciani, who introduced me to the bilirubin. Professor Boyer, who we speak. Professor Crepaldi, again, that pointed me in the right direction. My friend and colleague, Bruno Gridelli, the best transplant surgeon I worked with. Michael Nathanson, my co-director of the center, and he was director of the GI section and liver disease. Fred Gorlick, who sat with me during my first R1, even if I was a professor. And we went line by line to understand the jargon, the phrases, the things that needed to be in the grant. And Professor Garcia Tsao, that is a friend and a great hepatologist. And so thanks to the funding body that helped my career and helped my interest, okay? And if you go through them, you see the variety. You know, you have to find the money where it is. So the NIH and IDDK, Teleton, we had a few grants from Teleton, the Ministerial Research, the American Liver Foundation helped several of my trainees getting a scholarship, Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Polycystic Foundation. These are all, you know, major disease-oriented foundation. And then the Creto Bergamasco and Fondazione San Martino, because they helped me with the cellular. FADE, that helped me gather 1.5 million euros for a study on value-based medicine in Lombardy. The Connecticut Innovation Fund that helped us with the organoid study, and PSC partners for sclerosing cholangitis that have been always supportive and friends. And with that, I'm done. And I'm happy to take questions of this case study, although it's not a linear career, may serve as inspiration.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Strazzabosco. That was absolutely phenomenal tour de force of snapshots at really some key changing points throughout hepatology evolution. So before we get stuck into the questions, I'd just like to remind all the junior researchers out there, as well as the not so junior researchers, to please write your questions either in the chat box or the Q&A, and we will present them as we go along. But in the meantime, I think I can start off and we can ping pong back between us. Where do you start? I mean, you answered almost all of my questions during that great talk. But maybe I'll start off on your literally your title slide, which is really your intercontinental journey. So I think there's very few people on Earth who have so much experience of both the European systems and the American systems at multiple different times. So I was wondering if for the majority of the attendees today, I think most of us are probably from Europe, if we were to jump ship and go to the US, how representative do you think, for example, Yale's policies are of the wider university landscape in the US? And also, how do you think they compare to European institutions? Are there key differences either in hiring processes, funding practices, or the general work life environment that you think we should know about?
So moving to the US is a very big move. I believe you're talking besides the postdoctoral period, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving to the US as a faculty is a big move, because you're going to face a very different environment with different rules and different way of life. So it will take a lot of adjustments, but you will also enter a system, an academic system that is incredibly rewarding. Academic life in the US, I don't have enough experience for the UK. Academic life in the US is really what I, at least where I'm working, is really what I consider academic life. Because really the point is not politics, career. The point is really advancing knowledge, transmitting knowledge, and treating patients the best that we can. So I am pretty happy here with what is academic life at Yale. Okay, now academic life is also very difficult. You will face the problem of being granted, but then again, the experience that I had during my time in the study section was that the real outstanding grant, the real innovative idea, they get granted. Things get more fuzzy in the, when in the other 20 percentile, because that is more a matter of luck. When, these grants are all very good, they're all there. And that is where the thing become a little fuzzy. Then if you're a physician, there are even more complications, right? Because you have to be accepted into the professional level here. I have been blessed to work in both systems. I progressed in both systems, European, Italian in particular, and US also. And I have been practicing medicine in both places. I can tell you that we, as a European physician, have a lot to learn from American physician, but from the American system, but the American system has a lot to learn from the European system, mostly in terms of how to really take care of at the population level. Okay, so here you have places where care is outstanding and the attention for the patient is incredible, but you also have other conditional situations that are well known. Although, for example, Yale University, the other major university, we work as charities, basically. We see everybody. I never ask about what kind of insurance the patient has. Many of them don't have any insurance at all. But so you have to be ready to understand both the system. Did I answer your question or?
Absolutely perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. It's, why do you think that medical doctors are not so involved in basic research, and what we can do to persuade them to be engaged in basic research?
I wish I knew this answer. I think that
Yes.
There has been a focus on the clinical aspects in the last 15 to 20 years. And again, I have to distinguish between the US system and the American system, okay? The US and the Italian system in my case. So in the US system, we do see a decrease in the amount of physician that chooses to be a physician scientist. I think that this is due to two factors. One is, your salary is higher if you don't do science. And the second factor is worries about the ability to be granted and to sustain this travail every 5 years to be granted again, you know? So I think that many bright people don't remain in what we call basic science or translational science for these two main reasons. That's in the Europe. In Italy, it's really not promoted. I mean, when we started, there was my laboratory, Roma, with Professor Alvaro and Gaudio, and then Firenze with Pinzani and Marra, and Ancona with Benedetti and his collaborators. But when I was in Padova, they used to tease me around, you know. They would call me the little American because I would, you know, use an experimental approach. So one thing that here in the US helps a lot is the focus of the NIH. The NIH liver study section is really focusing on translational work, meaning T1, 2, 3. When you act as a referee of these grants, they really tell you that, you know, basic is okay. You know, there's no problem in saying having to have a immediate transferability to care. So that helps. This, to my knowledge, is not present in Italy, for example. Okay, you have programs that are very good and very basic, but they usually don't go to investigators that are also practicing physicians. There is also some skepticism. I remember a discussion with the University of Padua. There was some skepticism about whether a physician should also be an investigator in the lab. There are, you know, some people that think a physician should stay with the patient, and researchers should do the job. It's a field that is changing, is moving. I hope that people would be inspired by careers of people like me. We were able to make it.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Absolutely. I think.
Yeah.
But I'm sure people will be inspired. I was, so. Okay, I think that Vincenzo Cardinali wants to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Strazzabosco. Yeah, this was a very inspiring presentation for all of us, especially for a medical doctor like me that are trying to do translational science. Yeah, the question for you, Professor Strazzabosco, is indeed related to translational science. That is what we all try to do. According to you, considering the rising involvement of technology, what are the essential techniques, technology that translational research should use, should know in their study?
So I can tell you where we are investing here. So we are investing in, you know, powerful microscopy. We are investing in bioinformatics. A lot of the work that we are doing is using single cell transcriptomics at the moment. This is what, in terms of technology, we are investing. We're also investing on you know, they call big data, but you know, there's no big data. It's the ability to derive deep phenotyping in terms of clinical aspect outcomes with genotyping and so on. This is where we are investing, and this is probably where the future lies for somebody who is interested in addressing liver pathophysiology question, but also other questions. I can see this as the current. So, for example, we got years ago a very nice and capable postdoc from Pakistan, and she is now an expert in single cell transcriptomics, bioinformatics, this kind of thing. So this is where I see the newest application. So
thank you, Professor. It's I think the same. Indeed, for personalized approach, we need to really have also the ability to depict information from a big amount of data with artificial intelligence and
yes. These are all being, studied. We are applying artificial intelligence with our radiology colleagues. We're applying artificial intelligence to predicting the risk of bleeding. We are also a major investment we have made in the liver center is on generating human models, right? So organoids, induced pluripotent stem cells, because this is where we need to move, to get closer as possible to humans, and then to start experimenting novel treatment strategy as we accrue more information.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor.
Great, thank you very much. I think we have time for one last question from the audience, and that question is, do you have tips for junior physician scientists trying to balance demanding clinical work and research activity?
The way they deal with this in the US is that if you are funded, they will let you do 30% of your time in clinical and 70% is research. I don't think this is sustainable, honestly, based on my experience. I think you have to become a good physician, not only a good scientist. That's my point. You get great inspiration from being involved with your patients and so on. One tip that I feel could help is do not disperse yourself. Try to focus on an area which is germane to your more basic interest. So, for example, if you are interested in liver cancer, focus. If your clinical is on liver cancer, try to focus your research, or basic research, on liver cancer. If you are interested in cholangiopathies, try to focus your program and your research and your clinical activity on the group of patients that you will observe in the lab and in the clinic. So, an academic physician, which is a physician scientist, cannot end up treating everybody. And has to specialize around the area in which he is doing in-depth research. However, this is not always possible. Like I showed you during the presentation when the chairman called me and said that I had to do liver transplant. But then again, even if you have to do something more clinically oriented, if your mindset is the mindset of a researcher in pathophysiology, you will be able to transform those into pathophysiological advances. And in fact, I showed you the example of the transplant as a gift of knowledge. You know, we were getting very interesting cases, human derived material, and we made some very important observation. You know, the role of notch in repair came out of our, you know, observing a few patients that we transplanted that had Alagille syndrome. So, you know, there is always a way to rebalance when you are interested, really interested in doing science. So even if your clinical activity is for a period dramatically increased, you can still apply your scientific inclination to whatever situation you are.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think we will leave it there and pass over to the moderators to say goodbye.
And thank you again. Sorry, I have, yeah. Thank you very much again, Professor Strazzabosco, for your time and the great presentation, sharing your fascinating journey and interesting tips for junior and not so junior investigators. And many thanks, Maitane and Colm, for your great role as moderators. And thank you all for attending and participating. I hope to see you soon, since we are planning more new lectures. So enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye. Many thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Grazie
Bye,
mille,
professor.
grazie
Ciao, Chiara.
mille,
Grazie a voi.
arrivederci, grazie.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you
Arrivederci.
everyone, thank you Colm,
Many thanks, Chiara.
Maitane, thank you Rocio, grazie Vincenzo, ciao.